Hey there, Shooby Doodlers. Welcome to part 2 of my artistic career. I left you in the last episode, and I'd just been given my first art job in a place called J Copy in Bedford. And it was just off the high street. And it was an instant print shop. Back in those days, the trade unions had such a grip on things. You cannot believe it. If I wanted to do artwork, I'd have to do a 7-year apprenticeship to be able to get into the union. And if I just did artwork, I couldn't get it printed if I took it anywhere because I didn't have my union sticker on the back. They had it all completely wrapped up. So this new thing, instant print, started because it was so hard just to get stuff printed, and they racked the prices up, and so instant print started with lots of little independent companies who eventually got they all kind of got bought out and sort of got into. They eventually all got bought out and sort of got turned into franchises like Instaprint and stuff like that. But anyway, so we had this little shop. And I just started. My first job was to build some shelves and things like that. And then John was my boss. He was actually, looking back, he was a really good guy. And he was an engineering student. He had an MA in engineering. So he was very geeky. He was very political. One of the reasons he'd started up, I think, was because he was the local Liberal Party agent, which meant he was he was in charge of getting an MP to go to Parliament, and the Liberals. Anyway, it's British politics. But he needed lots of printing doing, so he thought, well, I'll start up my own printing company, obviously. And so that's what he did. So he walked in the front door, and over in the corner was a little A4 offset printing machine with Jerry working away on that, and then 2 state-of-the-art photocopiers and desk and stuff like that. And then you went up the stairs. There was his office at the front where he sat there all day long working out the books, planning, dreaming up schemes. And we then had an IBM Selectric typewriter, which I think it might have had golf balls, which meant different typefaces, and he would type out any text, which was a nightmare. If there was anything wrong, if there were spelling mistakes, you had to reprint it. You had to cut out the offending word and paste in a new one. And everything was paste up. So we were designing stuff for local people, plumbers, hairdressers, all sorts of stuff like that. I would sometimes get to do little logos and things, which was very exciting. But most of the time, I was dealing in text. And so we had big text, big sort of running text coming from this typewriter. And then all the headline stuff was done with Letraset. Goodness, I loved Letraset. I still have my Letraset handbook from way back then. I think, does it even tell you what time it dated? This is a slightly later one. This is 1983, but they used to come out every year. It was like a big thing. Oh, the new Letraset catalogue. What's new? And so you would go through. You would go through all these typefaces. Go, oh, that's a new one. That's a new one. Oh, look at that. That's beautiful. And I would get so excited. And I would literally take this to bed with me and drool over typefaces. And I knew them intimately. And so we had this Letraset, and it had all these little grooves and lines underneath, so you could actually work out the kerning and everything. And if you did it well, you could do it really beautifully. There were some papers that you could transfer the letters down onto, which worked absolutely beautifully. And eventually we kind of worked out a technique that was really good, and you got to be good at doing Letraset. And then you'd have to cut it out, and you'd have to snip it out, and then you'd have to. We used cow gum. I hate to think what it was made. It was obviously made out of old rendered down cow hooves or something, but we would use that, and it gave you this little bit of slippage just to get it level, and so you'd paste up the whole page with lots of little bits of text all sort of glued in here or there and everything, until eventually you got the whole thing. Oh, there's so much to put into these videos. I'm going to add here that this is where I first came across Rotring pens. So these were Rotring isograph pens, and they are like, the nib is a little hollow tube, and there's a very fine needle goes inside it which stops blockages, and that needle has got a weight on the other end, so when you shake it, the weight goes backwards and forwards, and it clears out the hollow of the tube so that the ink can flow through. And so you've got different thicknesses, so you can draw lines of different thicknesses. And so all artwork that had to have borders and things like that around it, you could do it with Electroset, but quite often that would crack, and then you'd have to ink it in with your Rotring pen. Or you would just draw out all these borders with Rotring pens. And so at that time, then the Rotring pen was kind of the sexy kind of thing that everybody used, and people got into this stippling kind of artwork. We're doing lots and lots of little dots, which the pen was really good for that. And when you look at a lot of artwork from that time, it has a particular kind of a feel to it, because people were using these Rotring pens and it was very much a style. Well, all my sort of early books were done with Rotring pens. Rotring pens were really expensive in those days. Like they were like £2, which is probably kind of $3.50 now or something. But £2 was a lot then, and every now and then they would snap, they would break, they would clog up. We got very, very good at being able to disassemble Rotring pens and clean them all out and put them back together again, and they'd work for another week. They'd tend to clog up over the weekend. But they would sometimes snap, or they'd fall on the floor and break. And so John would then go to petty cash and he'd give me a £5 note or something and send me off. Well, we were still with pound notes in those days, so who maybe gave me £2 notes. And he would send me off down to the art and graphics shop, which every town had in those days. And I would go and stand in awe in front of the Rotring pen stand and get myself a new Rotring pen. So then you would take it to the camera, which is this big, big thing, big bellows, the lens underneath it, lights on the side. And so you put your artwork in underneath it. And then on the top, there'd be a bit of sort of tracing paper, so you kind of get it in the right position and, and get it focused. And then you got a negative, which is like a big sheet of paper, which you put in the right place, got it all lined up nicely. Put down the lid, and then it would suck out all the air. There was a bit of rubber sheet would come down, and it would press that to the glass absolutely flat. And then you'd press the timer, and the lights would go on. And depending if you had it on a really high setting, if you had it on F22 or something, you sit there for a minute waiting for something to happen. So, but if you had it on F22, you get really sharp images, and put it down to F5.6, it was much quicker if you were in a rush, but it wasn't quite so sharp. So, and then we had these metal plates. So they were just sort of sheets of aluminium, and you would take out the negative, which is like black on one side and paper on the other, put the two together and feed them into a machine, and it would roll it through all this liquid, developing liquid, and out would come the plate, the other side, nicely squeezed dry, and then you'd have to wait again with the timer on. And if you got the timer wrong, it would overexpose and it would underexpose. Anyway, eventually you'd peel them apart, and underneath was this silver plate, and on it was the text back to front, and then you would set it. And then there was this wonderful cherry stuff, I can't remember, anyway, we rub on the top, and all the letters would go this beautiful pinky purple colour, and I can still smell it now. and then I would hand that over to Jerry, who would then put that on the litho printer, and that would print it. So basically, where it was shiny and silver, it would reject the ink, and where it was cherry colour, it would accept ink. So as the thing went round on a roller, it would take a little load of ink, and then it would go around and put it onto the paper and come around and get more ink, new sheet of paper, and it would keep going on like that. So that's what we were doing there. And then we had the photocopiers as well. And I used to have such fun with the photocopiers because you can do really, really interesting things. You could put your face on them and do all that sort of thing. It was kind of the beginning of punk and stuff around then, and people were making zines. And I got really into chopping stuff up and pasting them and making little magazines and things like that, which you could then print out on a photocopier really kind of cheaply. I think it was 10p a sheet then, which is actually maybe 5p a sheet, but still not cheap. And I remember one night we had a guy turned up, said, I got to do this job. And it was a company, Golden Chemicals, who'd gone bankrupt or something. And he had to photocopy all the accounts, having like sort of 3 or 4 copies of every sheet of paper. And so John sort of said, well, okay. And he made him an offer for how much it would cost him. And we just were there all night. Did this whole company's accounts. So we did all sorts of stuff. It was sort of jobbing, printing stuff. As I say, John was a real geek. And so we were the first people in the country to get an IBM Composer. Now, this was it was like a UFO coming down. And it was arrived 3 months late because it had sat in the station, hadn't been sent up on the train. Eventually they found it. This was incredible. And it must have had a memory of about sort of 1 byte or something like that. But what you did was you put a piece of paper in, it was just like a typewriter, and it had a golf ball, which meant that you could change the typefaces. Each golf ball had a different typeface. You would start saying record, and you would type in, you get to the end. So when it looked about right, you would get to the end and you would press return. But you would have to actually type in carriage returns CR or something. So it was just full of all these codes: left justify, right justify, sort of space, new paragraph. You'd have to type in all those codes, and so as you were printing it out, it looked really horrid. And then at the end, you'd sort of say end and then run, and then it would print out this beautiful bit of text. It was like magic. And it would stop every now and then if you told it to, so you could stop and change the typeface. And you'd have to tell it, we're changing now to a 24 point, well, I don't think they were that big. It came from 11 to 14 point or something like that. And it would stop and allow you to change. And it was magic. And so John had this brilliant idea that we would do mail. Oh, here he is. I've got to. Just had a man come to unblock the drains, but you don't want all the details. So where was I? So we had this fantastic composer, and John had this brilliant idea that we would do letterheads, mail order. And there was this, this is before eBay, before the internet. And if you, the eBay before the internet in England, or Britain anyway, was this thing called Exchange and Mart. It was a magazine that came out every Thursday, I think. And you would put in lots of classified ads, and people would go out and buy this thing and go through looking for bargains. So another new technology came in. John loved his technology. Paper plates. So it meant that you could put the plate straight into the composer, set up the type, and it would print onto the plate text. So it would be just for a text thing. And everywhere that the carbon was put down on the paper plate, that would pick up ink and transfer onto the paper offset litho. It meant you didn't have to go through that photographic process. It just speeded the whole thing up incredibly. We did A5 stationery sets, 100 personalised letterheads, because people used to write letters then as well, of course, with your address on the top. So you got 100 sheets of those A5, and envelopes as well in a box. That obviously means you can put 2 on one sheet of A4. So we get it set up so it was all done tumble turn, and you just print one A4, chop down the middle. That's 2 orders. that's speeding up the process. And so the advert went out, and the composer hadn't arrived, and it took about 3 months for this thing to go. And I spent most of my time with people phoning up, I'm very upset because I haven't had my order, placating people until finally this thing arrived, and we just worked like mad getting all these back orders out. And they were only about £1 each or something, plus postage. But anyway, so that was just amazing, because that just was these things were just flying out the door. So we had 2 other technological. I've actually got one. So you would get salesmen come around with all the latest ideas, all the latest technology, trying to convince you that's what you should have. And one thing was this. Dun, dun, dun. The Roto board. So you would stick your artwork onto there. Oh, let me get it up here. You would stick your artwork on here, and of course you can rotate it, and it would click 45 degrees, things like that. And then you had, where is this? I can't remember how it works now. So you had your ruler, which was nice and horizontal, so you could work out get your paste up. Yeah, so you press that button there, and it would work its way down, and you could set how many points you wanted it to move down. And you can see as I press, the ruler's moving down, so you can move it down point by point. That speeded things up no end. And we had another thing, which I see every now and then on eBay, and I think, oh, shall I get one? No, it's this just for old time's sake. Called a Caslon strip printer. And if you've ever seen 35mm film negatives, it was a bit like that. Great long thing. And it was a transparency, and they were kind of a red, a litho red is what they were. And covered in spiders now. And there would be the whole font on there, and you fed it through this machine, and underneath it was white photographic paper. And then you would get the letter that you wanted, and again there were all these little gradations, and you could work out the kerning really, really precisely, and you get A, and then press a button, psh, light would flash, and that would expose it, and then you would kind of press a button and hold it and push it, and then you're on to the next letter, and then you'd slide the thing up and down for the next letter, and you would slowly work out this thing called a strip printer headliner. And the quality you could get out of that was absolutely beautiful. And I suppose we had about 10 different fonts. So all our type was sort of based around sort of 10 different fonts for headlining. And if you really had to do something extra, you go out and get Letraset. Did I tell you about that? I can't remember if I mentioned that. So Letraset was these black letters on a plastic carrier, and there were lots of little lines underneath again so that you could work out the spacing, and you would draw a little line and and then rub them down. Some people rub too hard, and if you used a biro you would so there were I think I've even maybe still got the tool. This is my Letraset rubber downer. And you would rub the letter down, and it would transfer off the plastic backing onto the card, and you could do beautiful, beautiful things. And of course you could go around circles, and you could sort of do shapes and do all sorts of things. You could be really quite creative with Letraset. So we had quite a lot of fun at JCopy. And then something happened. I would work all day, and I would go back to my little flat because my parents had moved away, and I would paint and draw, and then I'd start painting and drawing into the night, and then suddenly I was painting all through the night and falling asleep, not going to work, and I got into this terrible thing of being awake all night and sleeping through the day. So they were kind of quite understanding for a while. But that couldn't carry on, and no, it was a complete terrible time. So I would be painting through the night, and it was really, really weird because obviously then I was using Anglepoise lamps and things and the old incandescent lamps, and I saw these fabulous paintings, and then the daylight would come and I go, oh. And of course the lighting values were different, and then as soon as nighttime came again, the lights came on, it's like, oh, these paintings have come to life again. And I remember one time in the middle of winter at that phase, going down to the local park, and I was going to paint the sunrise because I was there watching the sunrise every morning. So I went down to the park to paint the sunrise with my watercolour paints, and the paper froze, and my brush actually froze onto the paper. So that didn't work. My brother came and rescued me, took me away, and so I gave up my flat, one thing and another, and moved to where he was living. So the first thing I did was I got myself a night job in a bakery because I was working all night. Because I was awake all night, I might as well work all night. So I got this job in a bakery. My brother was running a haulage firm at the time, and they had this guy come and paint their vans. And he was talking to him, and he mentioned me, and he said, oh, we'll send him round. So I went round to see Roger Fortescue, who was a sign writer. He had a firm called Fine Signs. And so I told him all about myself and whatever. And he said, well, I've got this job next week. Do you want to come and help me? So I said, okay. And we went to the Brute 33 factory. Now, back then in Britain, on the adverts, on the TV, it was constantly about Brute 33. It was an aftershave for men. You got to splash it on all over was the big thing, and it pretty much stunk. And also there was this other perfume called Charlie, which all the girls wore. It was just the thing. And so we went to the Brute 33 factory, and just inside the big doors, was this double-decker bus with a little bit cut out at the back where you could have drinks and things like that. And it was for entertaining people, and they were going to take it. Brute 33 was sponsoring Formula One racing at the time, so they were going to take it to race meetings and things like that and entertain people. And they wanted Brute 33 written down the top of the bus, and they wanted a lot of it being painted as well. So I got immediately thrown into learning how to coach paint with these really expensive coach paints, and we painted it all up, and then started sign writing. And he went up on the roof and wrote out the letters, and he said, right, well, you go up there and paint them. So I was on the roof painting away, and then helping here. So we spent about a week doing that. And we would go over to the Charlie factory at lunchtime to their canteen, which was upstairs from where they were making this perfume. So all the food tasted of perfume. And at the end of the week, and of course I'd be helping him during the day, and then he'd drop me off at the bakery on his way home. And I'd work through the night, and I'd get about 2 or 3 hours sleep before he was picking me up again. And on the Friday night, he said, do you like working in the bakery? So I said, no, not really. He said, would you want to come and work with me? I said, yes, please. So I went and worked with him. And he taught me to do sign writing. And he was a wonderful patient teacher, and all sorts of things that I was really slow on. And he kept saying, you can do it, you can do it. And to this day, I still feel him breathing over my neck and saying, yeah, that's okay. and what was interesting with that was, having got this love of type from Letraset and from doing all the printing, then I went into actually inside the type and learning all the construction of the type, which was amazing. And we did all sorts of things. We did lots of boring things, but we did lots of exciting things. We did across the road from Windsor Castle is the Windsor Hotel, and it has, if you look, you might be able to find it, has these big wooden letters outside up really high, and they're all gilded and everything, and they were looking rubbish, and so they called us in and said we had to climb up there and unscrew these letters, which are about that high when you actually got them down, and we had to kind of fix them and re-gild them. So that was interesting, doing gilding. We used to do lots of estate agent, realtor signs. And we would do that screen printing, a very crude homemade screen printing system that we did, and we'd have to cut it all out by hand, all the lettering by hand, on the stencils. It was just fun. But, I don't know, I get this thing every now and then, it's time to move on, and wanting to be a rock star sort of call me back again. So I packed it in, and there's one of those things I always wonder what would happen if I'd have stayed. So I went back to Bedford, which is where I'd been at school and everything, and I got a job there with this strange company, British Building Supplies, and they were doing sign writing. So I'd seen an advert and I applied, and oh wow, somebody actually knows about sign writing. And they made signs for the building industry, and that involved a lot of, I don't know if you remember Dymo tape. So Dymo tape has lettering which is sort of pressed through plastic, and where it presses through it goes white. But this was sheets of aluminium with these letters, cut out letters, which we would paste up. And I say we, I would do it. I was the only person. So I paste up these letters saying, building site or something like that. And then, so they would be, sort of 5 mil high, something like that. And then put a sheet of aluminium on the top and a rubber sheet on the top and put them in a press. And so the letters would be pressed through the aluminium, and then they'd have to be sprayed, and then they'd go through these rollers which would just paint the tops. And that was quite interesting for a week, until I realised I was sort of fainting from all the fumes. And I was working inside a porter cabin inside a factory unit. There was no daylight. And they said, but we've got state-of-the-art, thing taking all the fumes away and for the spray booth. And I said, but it's still not working. I said, I can't breathe this stuff. I'm getting nightmares at night from all these fumes. Oh, well, we can't do anything. I said, well, I can't work here. So off I went. But that was quite interesting. That was sort of another little art technique-y kind of thing I learned there. The sign writing stood me in good stead there, because whenever I needed cash, I would just walk the streets and I would look up at signs and signs everywhere, and I would find signs that needed touching up, brightening up, or just redoing, whatever. And I would just knock on doors, and I would walk along and I'd see, a jeweller's shop or something, all the paint's peeling. And I'd go inside, say, your sign needs redoing. Oh, yeah. So I said, would you like me to redo your sign for you? How much is that going to cost us? And so I said, 60 quid cash. They go, oh, all right, because it would have cost them 150 or something like from a sign. Oh, all right. And so I have to go and borrow some ladders from somewhere, and I'd walk through the streets with these ladders because I didn't have a car. So I'd sort of some paints in my backpack, and I'd sort of turn up and climb up and sort of do these jobs. And so I could always get some cash in those days. And I tried being a bit of a rock star again at that stage. But my dad was dying at the time, and then he did die, and so I packed that up and I moved up to Peterborough, which is where my mum was living. So I found myself there thinking, what am I going to do? And got myself a job counting bicycles. So I was working for the local government there, and I would have to get up really early in the snow and sit down there in freezing cold, count every time a bicycle went past. And in the meantime, I got on the Yellow Pages, and I went through all the printers and anything to do with design. I was phoning them up. Get us a job. Get us a job. I can do this. I can do that. And then I found this one place called Peterborough Graphics, and they said, "All right, come and see us." I think that's quite enough for the moment, and I will tell you all about Peterborough Graphics and being in Peterborough in the next episode. So, thanks for watching. Come back for the next episode. I'll see you then. You take care now. Bye bye.